Get ready for one of the most shocking and disturbing stories in the Bible. In the book of Judges, chapter 19, we find an account so dark that many avoid talking about it. But today, let's delve deeply into this narrative that reveals how far human beings can move away from God. The brutality and tragedy of this episode will leave you speechless. Before we start, I ask you to leave a like, because it is with your support that we can continue to bring this type of impactful content. And most importantly, pay close attention to every detail of this story, as it carries profound lessons about responsibility, morality, and the consequences of our choices. Following through to the end can transform your perspective on the importance of faith and closeness to God. Be ready, because what you see next will leave a deep impression on you. There is a story in the Old Testament that, to be honest, I find one of the most disturbing in the entire Bible. In fact, it may not be suitable for all ages. So, before I continue, I want you to know that the content of this video may bring up traumatic memories. The story I am referring to is in chapters 19 to 21 of the book of Judges. Many people know chapter 19, but few follow the entire narrative. I believe there are very important lessons we must learn, despite the shocking content of this story. First, I will tell the story dramatically, and then we will discuss the lessons we can draw. Follow me in Judges, chapter 19, verse 1. At that time, Israel had no king, and a Levite, who lived in the hill country of Ephraim, took a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. To be clear, we are talking about a Levite from northern Israel who brought a woman from the south, from Bethlehem, to live with him. It turns out that this woman was unfaithful and returned to her father's house in Belem, where she stayed for 4 months. The Levite, wanting his wife back, traveled from Ephraim to Bethlehem to get her. The woman's father received him hospitably, and although he wanted to leave quickly, his father insisted that he stay another day. This cycle repeated for several days until the Levite finally decided to leave with his concubine. As they traveled back to Ephraim, the day was already ending, and as they arrived near a city called Jebus, the Levite's servant suggested that they spend the night there. However, the Levite refused, preferring to go to Gibeah, a city inhabited by Israelites. When they arrived at Gibeah, no one welcomed them. Only an elderly man, upon seeing them in the square, offered shelter. During the night, while they were at the man's house, a group of wicked men surrounded the residence and demanded that the Levite be handed over to them so that they could sexually abuse him. The owner of the house begged them not to commit such an atrocity, offering instead his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine. Unfortunately, the group refused, and so the Levite handed his concubine over to them. The woman was brutally abused all night and, at dawn, was left for dead. She barely managed to return to the house, where she collapsed exhausted at the door. The next morning, the Levite went out and found his concubine lying dead on the doorstep. He placed her on his donkey and returned home, where he committed an even more disturbing act. He cut the woman's body into 12 pieces and sent them to the 12 tribes of Israel, accompanied by a letter describing the crime. Upon receiving the pieces of the body and the message, the tribes of Israel were horrified, stating that nothing similar had happened in the entire history of the people of Israel. This led to a major civil war between the 11 tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin, of which the attackers were a part. The war was devastating, with thousands of deaths on both sides. In the end, only 600 men remained from the tribe of Benjamin. From this shocking story, there are important lessons to consider. The first is that when there is no authority and accountability, as was the case in Israel, people tend to go astray and make terrible decisions. The book of Judges describes a period when there was no king in Israel, and without leadership, people did what they thought was right in their own eyes, leading to tragic consequences. Another lesson is that we should treat all people as image bearers of God. In the report, the Levite and the owner of the house considered that the dignity of men was more important than the lives of women, something deeply wrong. This teaches us the importance of valuing every human being, regardless of gender or status. Finally, the further we move away from God, the more susceptible we become to making serious mistakes. The book of Judges as a whole shows a nation that has progressively distanced itself from God, and the events of chapters 19 to 21 are the culmination of this distance. This serves as a warning to us, showing how we can fall into sin if we lose our connection with God. The story of Judges, chapter 19, begins with a Levite who lives in the mountainous region of Ephraim in northern Israel and who takes a woman from Bethlehem in the south as his concubine. After a conflict, she leaves him and returns to her father's house. After 4 months, the Levite decides to go to Bethlehem to look for her. The woman's father is extremely hospitable, and for several days he tries to persuade the Levite to stay, postponing his return. Finally, he decides to leave, taking his concubine with him. At nightfall, they approach a city called Gibeah, in the land of Benjamin. They look for shelter, but no one welcomes them. An old man meets them in the square and offers hospitality. However, during the night, a group of wicked men from the city surround the house and demand that the Levite be handed over to them so that they can rape him. The owner of the house begs them not to commit such an act, offering his virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. Although this exchange is a demonstration of the depravity and devaluation of life at that time, the men insist. The Levite then hands his concubine over to the attackers, who abuse her throughout the night. At dawn, the woman returns to the Levite's house and falls dead on the doorstep. The Levite, upon finding her, places her body on a donkey and takes her back to his home. In a horrific act of desperation and denunciation, he cuts the concubine's body into 12 parts and sends each piece to one of the tribes of Israel, as a call to action in the face of the evil that had been committed. This act provokes indignation throughout Israel, leading the other tribes to unite against the tribe of Benjamin, who had protected the criminals of Gibeah. What follows in chapters 20 and 21 is a brutal civil war between the tribes of Israel and the tribe of Benjamin, with dire consequences for both sides. The story is a grim portrait of Israel's moral decay in that period, when, as the final text of the book of Judges states, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." Thanks for watching the video. If you found these lessons valuable, please share with someone who can also learn from this impactful story. This can help you reflect on important decisions. Don't miss the next video that appears on your screen, which brings more insights into your spiritual journey. Until next time.